Hi there. Let's now jump into Pro Tools and see how the MIDI configuration is done in Pro Tools for external MIDI synthesizers and instruments and control surfaces. Let's get going. Okay, let's start Pro Tools and see how the MIDI is configured within Pro Tools. And let's open our sample project. And we'll start with a empty project whereby let's create 2 tracks to start with to play around. One for audio, like let's make it stereo. Why not Tix? And then another for MIDI, and it is a MIDI track. So I have the names audio and MIDI. Let's create those. So now I have an audio and MIDI track defined. So audio for the reason that I get sound in from my external synthesizers, and then MIDI so that I can send out MIDI messages. And now of course this is already, I can arm this, and if I play MIDI keyboard, now everything is coming from different MIDI keyboards. Like for example, I could now also use Juno as my MIDI keyboard and MIDI controller, but in this case I'm using basically a Lumi key, and so MIDI is coming in, but it's not going anywhere. And you can of course then, if you want to now route a MIDI into a your external synthesizer, you can do it from here. However, this is quite tedious in order to do that, so you will need to kind of browse through all these unnecessary MIDI ports that are in your system, and you can of course do it like this. So like let's go into Juno 1 and channel 1. So now sorry, I didn't took the right one, so let's go Juno X and channel 1, and then of course I need to get the audio in from the Juno as well. I need to also arm the monitoring for that one, and then now if I play, I get sound from Juno, and of course I could change this to any other external synthesizer that I have. And I think JD was from channel 9. Let's revisit that. I have always programmed these into my DAW configuration, so I don't need to remember them. But yeah, it is like is JD and 990 and channel 9. But then of course we need to take the audio in from that synthesizer as well. So I go there, and now when I press, so the MIDI is now routed into my JD990. However, there are certain things in Pro Tools that you need to do when dealing with MIDI. First, if you would like to make this list a bit more kind of sensible, you could actually do so in Pro Tools, but that's the trick, that you actually need to go into setup and then MIDI, and then you actually need to open a MIDI Studio. And here, in order to smartly do things in Pro Tools, you actually need to do a few things in the MIDI Studio. For example, if I would like to use Juno in, so that I don't need to go through the extensive list of things in Pro Tools, I actually need to add a new external device. And I go here and basically say that this is a Juno X, and the manufacturer, there are many, not all. Then of course I can say that, you know, transmit in channel 9 and receive. I don't want to receive anything, so I leave that empty. So now it automatically goes to channel 9 and it offers only that. And you could send a MIDI beat clock or MIDI time code. So you can select also to send both. Depending on the case, the synthesizer either realizes the beat clock or time code, depending how old or new they are. So then you say apply. So now you have created a device here, but it's not linked to the Juno. So you need to actually link it in order to get the messages correctly passed to the MIDI out and MIDI in this case. And then of course, if I would like to do so now for the JD990 or anything else, I need to kind of repeat these. I just need to double check that I use the right port, so the port number is 10 in case of OBX8. And I'll transfer those as well. And now I'm happy with this one, so I do the same thing for this. So I link this. So now they are connected, and then I could do the same thing here for example, for the JD990. Also, if I'm as I am using TR8S, I can do that as well. So eventually I should actually map everything like this, so that they will be more easily manageable from or selectable in Pro Tools. I'll do one more. So now I have all these 4 different external devices defined. And now when we close this one, okay, let's close that one as well. Let's close this MIDI Studio. And now when I'm going here, I see that I have these actually already here. Although even though I select that I only use the channel, in this case channel 9, it isn't, it's displaying all the channels here. So, but anyway, now I have JD990. And it's much easier for me now to kind of select that in the list of predefined external devices. But you need to do that in your MIDI Studio. You can't do that in Pro Tools. But after you have done it over there, then you can of course select it here as well. This was channel 10, if I remember correctly, and then let's go for OBX. And that's basically, yeah, that's how it now works. Then there are a few additional things when it comes to MIDI setup. You need to actually also go here, and if you want to send, as we discussed in the Ableton session as well, if you want to synchronize your external synths with your digital audio workstation clock, you need to basically send the beat clock into those. So you need to send it to JD990 Juno X. You need to send it to basically to Moog, both Moogs, Virus XL, WaveStation, OBX8, and TR8S, and so on and so forth. So you really need to basically define these, and also define that you will send the beat clock to these devices. Then if the device, when the device is synchronized with your digital audio workstation, it will synchronize to the clock here, so that if you have 120 beats per minute, then the device will do things on that measurement as well. That's important in the sense that if you use device dependent effects or anything in the device that the device need to understand what is the beat clock and what is the MIDI clock, then you need to basically synchronize them. And it's always a good way to synchronize the outgoing MIDI so that when they play in sync with your digital audio workstation. So yeah, but that's pretty much it from here. Then there is another part still that you can do and configure when it comes to MIDI, and that is basically a MIDI input devices. So you could basically say that if I don't want to show Ableton as I'm not using it, I'm not using JD and Juno and Lumi, I'm using Machine I might be using, I'm not using as a MIDI input, or maybe if I want to use MIDI clock and these devices, I will of course have these enabled. Then I should have monogram monitor, but not the OBX8. And of course, when I use the SSL UF8, I need that to have an enabled. But other than that, that's pretty much it when it comes to MIDI for Vienna as well, if I want to send MIDI from Vienna for some reason. And yeah, so that's pretty much it when it comes to incoming MIDI. And so now when I say OK and I go here, for example, then my list of predefined is a lot smaller because I only see the ones that I have clicked that I want to get a MIDI information in. But I'll leave it all. So now everything basically that is configured and allowed will come in. And of course now it's a lot easier to go here and select the channel. But then again, there is actually one great thing regarding that you don't need to remember these, and we will look that later. And that's basically through kind of a track presets in Pro Tools, but that's another session when we look more at how to predefine these so that you don't really need to all the time remember these and map them and so on and so forth. So now if I go here and say that let's bring in the stereo from TR8S and I'm sending the MIDI clock out and so on and so forth. So now when I press play, the thing start to play within TR8S and the MIDI clock is synchronized. However, I don't have any drum patterns over there, so it doesn't bring any sounds. But then again, if we go back to here, why not, for example, Juno this time, and then also select Juno from here. Now here again, Juno. But yeah, the biggest trick here in Pro Tools is pretty much the MIDI Studio and then defining these external devices explicitly so that then you can see them in your Pro Tools selection. And then that makes life a bit more easier so that you don't need to go to this lengthy list of things and trying to pick things from there. So this simplifies things, but then there is another thing that how you should actually set these external instruments so that they are easy to be recalled also within Pro Tools. Okay, let's look how to configure MIDI controllers in Pro Tools. I have started my configuration with setting up the EuControl. So I downloaded the EuControl from the Avid side. And then I have installed it, and when I have installed it, it comes here into your menu bar. Then from here you can go into the settings. this will list all the kind of Avid enabled surfaces that you can use with Pro Tools, like S1 and others, like for example the iPad controller from Avid for Pro Tools. However, I just installed this just to use the iPad controller in whenever I need it. But in my case, I use the SSL UF8 that you see in the picture. And we can look now how to configure that type of a MIDI controller with Pro Tools, as well as Komplete control. So two different type of MIDI controllers to be used with Pro Tools. So let's go into Pro Tools and see how that goes. What I have done is that you need to right click here on this menu area or this top area, and then go to EuControl and enable the EuCon so that it is enabled in case you want to use different Avid controllers with your Pro Tools configuration. So this is how you need to enable it in order to use, for example, the iPad controller. However, when setting up externals, you go to Setup and Peripherals to set up, for example, the SSL UF8. It's a HUI type of a controller, so I need to pick the HUI first and then go and select the right port, which is the port 5 that I have configured it. And then also, of course, the destination needs to be the same. And then once I now press OK, you can see that how the SSL UF8 will lit up, and now I have a control over. Now I have a control over Pro Tools with that one. So I see of course the current tracks over there. Then I see the transport control. I can, of course, this can be all configured for your taste. So I have done some configuration for my own taste for this one. And anyway, when I go and now press play over here, it starts to play. I have returned to 0 here, so I will return to the beginning of the song. Then, for example, to switch views, I have configured this quick number 1 as a switcher for the view. So this is how I can, with this MIDI controller, I can now control Pro Tools. And of course, when I go into mixer, I can control the mixer as well. So all that is now configured and synchronized with Pro Tools. And this is my main go-to with Pro Tools to use as a transport control. However, I'll just also configure, just for sake of example, another peripheral, which is basically Komplete control. And it automatically picks up the right channels for it, so I don't need to select them. Then I say OK, and now basically when I press play from the Komplete control, as I did, I can now basically then control the Pro Tools through that as well as play MIDI notes if and when needed. So this is basically how you do the MIDI controller configuration from peripherals, and you can have 4 of them, so that's basically 4 external ones. And then of course when and if and when you use Avid controllers, you configure them all over here. But that's basically it from how to configure MIDI controllers in Pro Tools. So that concludes our MIDI configuration session with Pro Tools. Next we will dive into Logic Pro X and see how it is done in Logic Pro X. Remember to subscribe for the channel, stay tuned, and thanks for watching.